Nearly 3 years ago I made a top 10 obscure JRPGs for beginners. About time I came back with 10 more, right? So welcome to part 2, and without further ado, let's begin! Number 10. Stella Glow. Stella Glow is a simple yet fun little strategy RPG. It's one of those that start off easy, then very slowly gets more challenging, but to be honest with you, it's a highly balanced game, which is why I recommend it to beginners. It's about a small platoon that's in search of a few witches because they don't want the bad guys to find them first. It doesn't really shine on its story though, it's more about the characters and their personal endeavor. Before every mission, for example, you'll get some free time which you can spend with any ally to learn more about them. A small dating simulation, if you want to call it that. The maps are well designed to be easy to understand and easy to get into. You move your people on grids and they all have attacks, magic skills and spells. It's the usual stuff, even though it sounds generic, but it's pretty good. Give this one a try if you like what you see. I think it's a great place to start in tactical RPGs. Number 9. Magical Star Sign. A bunch of students start a journey to look for their missing teacher all across the galaxy. It's a turn-based RPG with some Star Ocean influences, but only in terms of story. You could say it's a game actually made for kids because of its cheesy comedy, character jokes, and colorful nature, but in reality, anybody can play it. The interface, controls, and pacing are solid here, enough to compel a beginner's request. It just has a lot of personality which will make you forgive anything childish. Plus, it's such a balanced game that you won't have any issues learning or playing through it. Regular encounter rate and amazing combat here. Every kid student has their own element, strong and weak against the enemies. It's up to you to play around with that, but it's very easy to understand and get into. Besides, I think the magic spells are badass here, which helps with its lovely visual design. Check this out if you can, it's only on the Nintendo DS, but I don't think it's expensive yet. Number 8. Tokiden Kiwami. A lot of people I know agree with the following statement. Tokiden is basically Monster Hunter for beginners. Indeed it is, as it's nowhere near as challenging as most of those games, or even the God Eater series to use another example. Those games are hardcore, and well, I guess Tokiden can also be hardcore if you want to do everything there is to be done, but it's a quest-driven RPG that can get repetitive if you play it too much in one sitting. Basically, your customizable character will get sent on missions with party members that are kind of broken and overpowered at the beginning, so the first several hours the game will be fairly easy until it slowly starts building up in challenge. That's a good sign for a JRPG starter. Controls are good, combat is excellent, and obviously fighting the big monsters is where the real fun is at. Developed by Omega Force, masters of hack and slash, so of course Tokiden excels in battle mechanics. Just like its sequel, it's also on PSP, PS Vita, and Steam, though I believe the PSP release is exclusive to Japan. Number 7. Rhapsody, a musical adventure. Man, I love that town theme. Anyway, this game was originally released on the PlayStation, developed by Nipponichi Software but published by Atlus. Some years later it will reappear on the Nintendo DS, but with its battle mechanics changed. Original version was remastered a few days ago on the Switch and Steam, alongside Onimusha Tactics. The latter is a solid strategy RPG as well, but I'm not sure I could recommend it for beginners as it's kinda complex and difficult, but if you get Rhapsody on Switch, you'll get Onimusha as well since they come together. Anyway, I mentioned combat changed in the DS version, let's get back to that. PS1 and Switch versions have this hybrid of turn-based and strategy since your characters move on grids, but on very small areas. The DS version was straight up simple turn-based. Don't worry, you can start with any version you want as this is one of the easiest JRPGs ever made. In fact, it's so easy I might recommend playing it on hard mode. But it's still very fun and enjoyable no matter the difficulty since it's such a lovely and charming comedy that's bound to cheer you up, taking a few laughs out of you. Number 6. Enchanted Arms. I know this one got a bit of a bad reputation for being a launch title, but I don't think it was ever intended to be a AAA JRPG to compete with the big ones. It's got a decent enough story with some interesting twists. I believe it to be also a cool game for beginners since it's so away from how complex the combat looks. As you can see, up to 4 characters can fight around in grid-based formations directly in front of their enemies with the same layout. Trust me, it's very easy to understand however intimidating it may seem. Besides, the difficulty is pretty balanced, the game's quite easy for the most part until little by little it starts getting more challenging. That's great pacing for difficulty in my opinion. It's all about positioning your characters as you best see fit and move them around to avoid attacks or hit their enemies. It's surprisingly simple, and you can have your main human characters fighting or alongside the monsters that you summon. This is a pretty solid game, no masterpiece but very enjoyable and ideal for beginners. It's also on the Xbox 360. Number 5. Onimusha Tactics. Been a while since I last covered this one. Came out for the GBA, but it was digital on the Wii U, I think. Yes, it's part of the Onimusha universe, only whatever god you believe in knows why the hell Capcom decided to make a strategy RPG based on it. No, you don't need to play any Onimusha game to understand this one, it's 100 standalone, it's a spin-off. In a nutshell, you control Onimura and party in a quest to stop Nobunaga's ambition from fulfilling. Characters fight in mapped layouts within a view similar to Tactics Ogre or FFT. In fact, it plays a little bit like those games but in a simplified way. Just don't expect a deep job system like in them, everyone here has their default class set up from start to finish. Remember the Mercenary Saga on the previous video? Well, let's just say this game is just like that, which is great for beginners. Though I would like to point out that this one gets more challenging as time passes, but it's a strategy RPG, they're meant to be this way. Fortunately, it holds your hand for a while so you can understand the basics no problem. Number 4. Sakuna of Rise and Ruin. This game on Switch, PS4 and Steam took me by surprise. It's a 2D action RPG with farming simulation elements. I'm not a fan of those, but here they aren't as extravagant as in other games. They're pretty simple to understand and carry through. It's weird that you level up by completing a year's worth of Rise, but the mechanics involved in racing it are both simple and fun. Its combat is open within the exploration of different dungeons that you'll visit a few times for materials and such. Fighting is done with Sakuna and she's kinda hard to control, but it's her chaotic nature that might lure you into experience amusement and gratification, especially because the bosses are incredibly fun to fight. The one thing I do want to point out is this. Sure, most beginners can pick this one up as their first action RPG in 2D, but it's somewhat challenging, keep that in mind. I didn't know there was a casual mode until after I beat it, so it might help using it if things get too difficult, which should be okay. Number 3. Hexis Force. Hexis Force lets you choose between 2 main characters, Levant and Cecilia. Their stories are intertwined, but they don't share party members or meet halfway through. In fact, their entire route is completely different from each other, which makes doing 2 playthroughs very worth it. The advantage here is that it's a fairly short game, so you'll be done with one character in 10 to 15 hours. We're following a racial war which also involves some evil creatures and madman shenanigans, adding more spice to the plot. It's a traditional style RPG where you go from town to town with areas, fields and dungeons in between. Puzzles are there, so get ready to use your brain every now and then. Battles are played in turns with up to 3 party members that can be moved around in a few grid formations. It focuses a lot on the characters' weapon magic attacks, which is the highlight of the combat. This is a fantastic turn-based RPG in need for a modern release. Let's hope that happens one day, but in the meantime, thank goodness the PSP is so easy to emulate because the price of its physical release is absurd. Number 2. Mana Kimia 2. Another game that is expensive and hard to get nowadays is Mana Kimia 2, exclusive to the PlayStation 2. Please Ghost, Nice, Koei Tecmo, or whoever has the rights to this, please bring it back. It's such an amazing game in the Atelier series. However, it doesn't quite play like them. It takes place in a high school with some small sim elements, also with the usual Atelier features, you know, gathering items and synthesizing stuff, but it's more adventure and story focused than the other games in this long-running series. I think it's a great place for beginners because, just like Hexis Force, there's only a few boss battles that'll give you a little trouble, but it's an extremely balanced game, easy to jump into. It's a sequel to Mana Kimia 1, in my experience a harder and more complex game. Some characters come back from it, but the story and main characters here are still 100% new, which means you don't really need to play the first one to understand this one. There's just a few references here and there to it, but it barely spoils anything. Story's great, just like in Hexis Force you choose between the guy or the girl, each with their own story and party members. Battles are turn-based in an excellent combat where you can switch between standby allies if things get rough. Amazing game here. I wouldn't suggest paying the hefty price this game goes for nowadays, so I suggest emulation as the best course of action. Number 1. Sakura Wars. One of the very few PS4 exclusives out there, for now of course. Will it ever get a Switch release? I'm not sure. If it's in this list, that means it's already become kind of obscure despite being only a couple of years old. It was advertised as a reboot of the Sakura Taisen series, the majority of them being Japanese exclusives, but in reality it follows the events and characters of that series, but more as idolized facts and heroes. You don't need to play anything before jumping over here, it's a standalone story. Just keep in mind it has strong visual novel elements but very interactive ones. It never feels boring or tedious since you're always making decisions that will eventually affect the harrowing ending. That's right, it's a bit of a dating simulator, so you'll have to pick a girl by the end of the game. Now, this entry is a hack-and-slash action RPG where you'll be taken to missions and fight against enemies while in your mechs. You can partner up with only one girl, but sometimes others will join, mostly unscripted quests. There's a lot more gameplay mechanics involved here, like minigames and exploration, but it's a beautiful game with a perfect balance as an action RPG, excellent for beginners. My only honorable mention is the other Sakura Wars, previously released on the Wii and PS2. That one is a strategy RPG, but its mechanics are very similar to the PS4 game, although they are entirely different games and stories. Perfect for beginners too, since it's not too easy, but definitely not hard. I just didn't include it because both versions are kinda pricey nowadays and hard to find, plus I didn't want to have two games of the same series in this video. But anyway, strongly recommended. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!